What's up, everybody? The release of Star Wars Episode 7 The Force Awakens is upon us. Yes, that's right, the first Star Wars movie in 10 years will be coming out December 18th of this year. What better time than now to review every single Star Wars movie ever made? Starting with Episode 1 all the way until Episode 6. I'm going to review each and every live action Star Wars movie. But instead, I'm going to review them in the reverse order, the way that they were meant to be seen, starting with Episode 4 and then leading to Episode 1. So if you don't follow the original trilogy, then the prequel trilogy. Cool. And of course, for movies that are decades old, I will be giving spoilers. So now that we got that out the way, here we go. So unless you've been living under a rock for the past, I don't know what, 35 years, Star Wars is undoubtedly and undeniably the biggest and most influential movie franchise we've ever seen. And it all started with this movie right here, the original Star Wars movie released in May of 1977, which is gonna be the first movie that I review. So Star Wars was directed by George Lucas, and the plot focuses on the Rebel Alliance, which was led by Princess Leia, and their attempt to destroy the Galactic Empire space station, the Death Star. Luke Skywalker, played by Mark Hamill, inadvertently encounters a pair of droids who actually have the architectural plans for the Death Star. And you can pretty much assume that this leads him to pretty much become involved in the conflict. A really space operatic galactic conflict. Along the way, he meets Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi and agrees to become a Jedi and fight for the good of the Republic. So while filming this movie in 1976, George Lucas had a litany of problems going on with the production. I mean, there were financial issues, there were production issues, everything that could go wrong with this movie did go wrong. But it's not like Star Wars isn't a good movie, it's a great movie, and it came out to be something that was completely unexpected. I mean, Star Wars overperformed in every aspect. Critics loved it and fans loved it. It became the highest grossing movie of all time up until that point. I mean, at that time in 1977, it made like 740 million worldwide. That was completely unheard of. Not only that, Star Wars legitimately became a cultural phenomenon. Everybody was in love with this franchise and this movie. Everybody was in love with the characters and then the merchandise. It just blew up completely out of nowhere. And finally, the US government selected the film and deemed it culturally and historically significant to be placed in the National Film Registry. And I mean, that's big. When the Library of Congress selects your film as something that's culturally and historically significant, you've done something very, very important. But no, seriously, people, this movie is seriously one of the most important movies in US history. I mean, like, up there with Citizen Kane important. Like, it really paved the way for an entire generation of filmmakers. I mean, we just know the people that have been influenced by Star Wars. One of the key people is J.J. Abrams, who's finally gonna direct a Star Wars movie. He was always vocal about how influential the movie was on his career. And that's because Star Wars took us to a place we had never seen. Space. It was a galactic story. It was a space opera of epic proportions. And not only that, it gave us characters that we actually cared about. Luke Skywalker. He was a hero that we could believe in, a hero that we could relate to. He was inadvertently placed into this conflict that was much larger and much bigger than him. And then alongside Luke Skywalker, you had characters like Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Jedi Master. You had Han Solo. You had Princess Leia. You know, all of these characters were people that we cared about because the story was so good and so in-depth and real that it was just something that just really resonated with so many people. And of course, we know that the things that are happening in space, we haven't explored that territory. We don't really know much about it. It's really a fantasy story when you think about it, but the characters and the conflict are something that just seems all too relatable. And not to mention Darth Vader, one of the most iconic and greatest villains in film history, in any history, I mean any medium. He is iconic, he was menacing, and he was introduced in this film. But every element that was just introduced in this movie became something iconic. It became something that people can identify. The presence of stormtroopers. Stormtroopers became iconic. R2-D2 and C-3PO, those became iconic characters in their own right. When you start talking about the Force and the dark side of the Force and the balance of power, that became something iconic that people related to. The Death Star and its power and its menacing presence in space and the control and the mutiny that it had, everything just worked, and it also became something iconic in its own right. This is legitimately a movie from top to bottom that has nothing but iconic and memorable moments that can be seen in so many films. So many films have been so influenced by Star Wars that they've taken elements and things from this original film and have placed it in their own. But the world was just taken back and it became a cultural phenomenon, legitimately a phenomenon. And honestly, that is something that you literally only get maybe if you're lucky once in a generation. Star Wars was that movie for that specific generation, and it has resonated. Here we are 35 years later, still the biggest and most influential franchise to ever hit theaters. I mean, even this movie gave birth to Industrial Light and Magic. George Lucas created that company to handle the visual effects of this film. Industrial Light and Magic handles all of the visual effects for some of the biggest movies out. The Transformer franchise, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the Avengers. Just so many big movies used that production company, that visual effects company. It started with this movie. And it was because this movie was so cutting edge for its time, just the whole aspect of space and spaceships and other beings and other galaxies and planets. And all of these things really just came together to create such a fantastical world that has been exponentially expanded upon. Not to mention even the music that was identified with the movie. The Star Wars theme has become iconic in itself. The opening crawl and the opening cinematic titles and just everything, like literally when I say everything in this movie from top to bottom has become something of its own and has become an iconic image. I'm serious. That's why this movie is just so important in Hollywood and cinema history. Ever since 1977, there have been dozens and maybe even hundreds of books. There have been hundreds of video games, many spin-offs and movies and animated cartoons and merchandise. Just everything has come from this movie to create a brand that is so worthy of so much money and so much just respect and influence in all of the world. It is, like I said, a phenomenon. The legacy of Star Wars will be known for many things. It launched the careers of Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, and Harrison Ford. It created potentially the most menacing and iconic villain in movie history, Darth Vader. It opened up an entirely new world that we had not seen in film before. It took us to space. Not only did it spawn sequels and more movies, but it spawned video games and spin-off series and comic books and merchandise that has become worth almost nearly $40 billion ever since 1977. And it has produced so many spoofs and imitators and duplicators ever since then. So many people spoof and imitate Star Wars. It's not even funny. Like, there's an entire documentary on everything that has been spoofed about the Star Wars movie and franchise. And literally, when I think about the movie isn't the greatest. It isn't the greatest. I do enjoy Star Wars, the original Star Wars, but it does have better movies in the franchise. But that's not why this movie is gonna get a perfect score for me. Everything that I've already told you is why this movie gets a perfect score. Its legacy and its influence is just completely unmatched. And honestly, for that alone, Star Wars, forget even the subtitles, Star Wars, the original film, the 1977 film, gets a perfect 10 out of 10. And if you disagree with me, that's on you, but you're mad because this movie started it all. Alright folks, that's all I got for my original review of the Star Wars movie from 1977. Check out my other Star Wars reviews for all the other films. Follow me on social media at JRW The Creator. Go check out my website, JordanRWilliams.com, and I will see y'all next time.